Increase our faith, the apostle said to Jesus. Or in the translation I prefer, increase our trust. I wonder if Jesus was disappointed by this request. I wonder if Jesus thought, here I am among you every day. You witness what I do, you hear what I say, you know who I am, and you still want more? You need me to give something else to earn your trust in God? Perhaps he did think this, because his first response to the apostles was simply to suggest that even with the smallest trust, a trust no larger than a mustard seed for them, their life would be transformed. If they had even that much trust in God and God's power, they'd be able to turn to the tree before them and say, be uprooted and planted in the sea. And it would obey them. But it's an astonishing statement, and yet Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes on to say something in some ways even stranger. He asked his disciples, who among you would come in from working in the field and say to your servant, it's dinner time, so come and sit at the table with me? Instead, wouldn't you rather that they go and prepare your dinner first and only sit and eat on their own, and then go and sit and eat their own meal later? Isn't this what you expect of them? Oh, I know. We all believe in democracy and equality, so most of us probably would invite the poor man to sit and join us. But this was another time. And isn't this a servant's job, to prepare their master's meal? And when they've done this, would you think of it as something special? Haven't they just done what they're supposed to do? This is a paraphrase, of course, but it is in fact what Jesus is saying. But what does it mean? What in heaven's name does when a servant has his dinner have to do with trust in God? Any ideas? I mean, really, the two statements seem to be completely unconnected. Or are they? Actually, I see a link. It reminds me of something that happened to me many years ago. I was 19 at the time. I was in college, and I had signed up for a course on Eastern religions. I found it all fascinating, particularly the section on Zen Buddhism. I had always been intrigued with Christian mysticism, so I found myself drawn to Zen because of its emphasis on meditation. But there was one thing I couldn't figure out. I knew that in Zen, the goal of meditation was something that the Buddhists called enlightenment. But I couldn't get anyone to tell me what that was. Every time I asked for an explanation, I get only the vaguest answers. What is enlightenment? The teacher would echo in response to my question. That's when you see something, see things as they truly are in a way that transformed you and all you do. But what does it actually look like? I asked. That you have to find out on your own, the teacher said. But how do I do that? The teacher smiled. By becoming enlightened yourself, he answered. And how do I do that? I asked. His smile broadened into a grin. Well, I suppose the best way would be to go to Japan and study Zen. The thing is, in that moment, I resolved to do just that. I at once began to study Japanese and applied to spend my next year studying in Tokyo. Once there, I found that studying Zen was going to be much harder than I thought, however. It turned out that the only place to study Zen was in a monastery. In most cases, that would mean becoming a monk, which I definitely did not want to do. But I eventually discovered that there were a few monasteries that would allow short-term students who were not monks. Some even welcomed foreigners like myself and had English translators. I enrolled at once. I showed up at the ancient monastery with my backpack, determined to finally discover what this thing called enlightenment really was. I knew that this would involve meditation. I had tried it a few times on my own and felt that I was ready. I had no idea how wrong I was or how intense true meditation could be. When I arrived, I was told just leave my bag in the entryway and was led at once to the meditation hall where a line of monks were already sitting straight backed and cross-legged on their meditation cushions. My guide showed me to my own cushion. I knew that this would be the hard part. I had practiced sitting cross-legged, but it wasn't easy for me. It involved putting my left ankle over my right thigh and then somehow tucking my right ankle up over my left thigh so that my legs became a sort of a pretzel. It was painful, but after some effort, I could manage it for a few minutes at a time. I took my place on the cushion and slowly forced my legs into that correct position. Then I drew in and exhaled several deep breaths. After that, I simply sat in silence, following my breath and letting go of my thoughts as best I could. 5 minutes passed. Already my legs were beginning to hurt. Then 10 minutes passed as the pain got worse. After 20 minutes, I could think of nothing else but the excruciating misery in my legs. At 40 minutes, I finally gave in and untucked my right leg. I felt a moment of sudden relief as I slowly straightened my leg, but then suppressed a groan as my left leg began to throb even more with stabbing bolts of agony. After what seemed like an eternity, but which was in fact a single hour, the silence was suddenly broken by a small bell. Everyone stirred and began to move. Feeling like I was unraveling miles of screaming nerves, I slowly uncrossed my legs. Both were now as heavy as a stone. They had fallen asleep. I climbed unsteadily to my feet, turned and mimicked the monks as they bowed to their cushions, then tottered after the others as they exited the room. Half an hour later, we were back to sit for another hour. Then another. Then another. In between the meditation, we were given jobs to do. Floors to sweep, dirty pots to clean, gardens to weed. Several times we paused for a simple meal of rice and vegetables, but mostly we sat, just sat. At 12 p.m., I was shown to my room where I collapsed onto the bed made up for me on the floor and fell asleep at once, just about as exhausted as I had ever been. A bell woke me at 5 a.m., and I processed with the others to the meditation hall, where we began it all again. It was so intense and rigorous. One of the most challenging things I had ever done. The only real break in this routine was when the silence was broken for a brief talk by the abbot of the monastery, a withered little man who everyone called sensei, which means teacher. He would talk about enlightenment, the thing I had come for. And whenever he spoke, I was at once alert, hanging on every word. Sensei spoke slowly, and I waited impatiently for his words to finish and the translator to take over. Then I did my best to understand. But even in English, I couldn't seem to grasp what he was saying. The teacher I had had at college had said that enlightenment was seeing things as they truly were in a way that transforms you. I tried to picture what that might be. I imagined myself understanding things that I could not even picture now, so that all my doubts and confusion and uncertainty would vanish, and I would always know exactly what to do and how to act, and I would feel such peace and confidence. But how did I get there? I just couldn't see that. I felt so frustrated. Apparently, I was not alone in this either, because another one of the foreign students asked a question after one of Sensei's lectures. Yes, he said in English, I have a question. You keep talking about enlightenment, but what is it really? And once I sat up a little straighter. That's it, I thought. That's the question. Sensei just shrugged. His answer was brief. You'll only know what enlightenment is when you're enlightened, he said. Oh, I was so disappointed. But the questioner didn't stop. But how will I know that I am enlightened, he pressed. Okay, I thought, finally, now we're getting somewhere. I held my breath as Sensei spoke, waiting for the translator. At last, Sensei finished, and I saw a small smile spread over the translator's face. Then he began. How will you know that you're enlightened? The translator repeated. Oh, that's easy. You'll know when you wake up in the middle of the night and looking around, make sure that everyone else is asleep. You'll climb silently from your bed, slip over to the closet where the cleaning supplies are found, then go to the lavatory and thoroughly clean all the toilets. You'll then return to bed, and never once will you say a thing about this to anyone, so that no one will know that you're the one who's doing it. But every few days, you'll do it again. When you do that, you'll know that you are enlightened. By now, some of the older monks were smiling and nodding, but I was sitting with my jaw hanging open. Really, I thought, this is enlightenment? Cleaning toilets? This is what seeing reality as it truly is involves? This is what I came to Japan to learn? And you know what? It was. It took me a long time, but eventually I learned that it was true. How can you tell that you're enlightened? Or how can you tell that you trust God deeply enough? It's not by performing miracles or seeing things that others don't see. No, it's simply this. It's doing the things that have to be done to care for others without hesitation, without complaint, without expectation of reward. That's it. Just doing what you have to do to make the life of those around you a little better. That was Sensei's point. It was Jesus's point too. Because in the end, I've discovered that enlightenment is nothing more and nothing less than trust in God. It's seeing the reality of God and turning over your life to Him. And if you trust God enough to do this, you will have all the trust you need. And even if it is no larger than a mustard seed, it will get you through. Better than you know, it will get you through. Amen.